Hello, and welcome to Our Special Lives. I'm Laura McGrath, and today we are talking with relationship expert and coach Jane Copier about 5 ways that you can fix your relationship all by yourself. And before we get started, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. Hi, Jane. Welcome back to Our Special Lives.
Hi, thanks for having me back, Laura. It's good to see you again.
We're so happy to talk to you again. And I love today's topic, which is 5 ways that you can fix your relationship all by yourself, which is so counterintuitive to what most people probably think about their own relationship. So I'm really excited to talk to you about this.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a belief that we all have. In fact, so many of my clients will come to me thinking there's no way that I can ever be happy in this marriage because I can't get my partner to change. And that thought is just so definitive because there's no other option, right? And so, yeah, opening that door, having that conversation, and actually seeing that there are totally things that you can do in order to change your marriage on your own without involving your partner at all is just key.
Yeah, that is amazing. So today we're talking about these 5 tips, and your first one is patterns.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
First of all, let me just, if I may, can I
Sure.
just start? I want to share a little bit of my story because I think it's important to let people know, like, the reason I can speak to this is it's something I've gone through myself. And so I had a difficult marriage. I struggled for years and years. My husband and I have been married for 32 years, and probably for at least half of those, I was very unhappy, feeling very much in victimhood, very much blaming him for the way that I felt, blaming him for my dissatisfaction in our relationship. I was mad about his job. I was mad about all the things, like the way that we raised kids together. And it was really his fault. Right. So, around 2007, my brother became a life coach, and he kind of helped me learn these tools, how to manage my thinking, how to evaluate my thoughts, and learn how to create a better emotional experience for myself, which was fantastic. But I couldn't figure out how to do it in my marriage because I wasn't the only one. I was dependent on my husband still because there were two of us in this dynamic. And so for me, when I heard my coach, who, is your coach too, Brooke Castillo, when I was listening to her podcast one day, I'd gone out for a drive and I was driving up in the mountains, which I do often because I just love the mountains. It's just kind of a peaceful place for me. And I often will drive and I'll listen to a podcast or something. And I was driving and I remember hearing her talking about her husband and about their relationship and how she had been able to use these tools to change her relationship. And the way that she talked about him was the way that I wanted to feel about my husband. And I didn't. And I was like, if she can do this, I can do it too. So I want you to know, like, for all of your listeners, if you're in that space where you think this is impossible for me because I can't get my partner to change, it is 100% possible. And I did it myself without asking my husband to change one bit. Like, truly.
Yeah.
I know it's really hard to believe, but it happens when we can shift the pattern. So when we talk about patterns, what we're talking about is, as we interact in our marriage, we're newly married, right? And then life happens and we start to shift our focus and other things come up. And the stresses of everyday life happen. We have financial pressure. We have, circumstances that are hard, maybe some illness or, finishing school, pressures on the job,
or a special needs child,
accidents, a special needs child. Yes. All of these things that come that shift our focus away from each other. And we kind of just develop these harmful patterns. So, and it starts off very innocently, like we lose our temper and then someone will react. And then the next time it's just as easy to do that. And maybe it gets a little bit worse. And then after years and years of this same pattern have happening, and it can be the smallest thing. It can be like he left a dish in the sink, and then we get upset and then we don't say anything, but we give the cold shoulder, or maybe we come home late and they're bugged by that. And then we just have this pattern of how we react, so all of us in all of our relationships develop these patterns. And the way that we change our marriage on our own is we have to disrupt the patterns. We have to stop blaming our partner. We have to evaluate the pattern, right? I have a little acronym and it kind of is helpful. Um, and I just call it NICE. this is NICE, right? I was looking at it and saying, how can I make this? And the first thing is just to notice, what is the pattern? What is the trigger and what's the response in our pattern? So we'll have something that happens. That would be an A. That's the trigger. B would be the response. That's my response or my spouse's response. And then C is the result that it creates. So days and days of arguing or whatever, right? And that is our pattern. And so what I want to do is interrupt my portion of it. So I have to notice what the pattern is first. I have to identify what's happening. What's the trigger? What's the response? What is the pattern? So that's the N. And then I is identify. And that's where we're going to identify what my part is. Am I the trigger or am I the response? What is my part? Because if I can interrupt the pattern by changing my part of it, then I disrupt the whole pattern. A plus C now equals F or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our partner has to shift with us because we're no longer interacting the same way. So once we identify what our part is in it, then we can figure out what we can do to change and make it a little bit better. And then C, yeah, did you have a question?
I just had a question. So, could you give us like just a couple of examples of maybe one or two common patterns that you see between, partners? So, like, for example, I've made dinner and my husband is late and he didn't text me or call me, right?
Yeah.
So,
So,
what's a typical pattern that would happen if that's the circumstance?
Yeah. Well, oftentimes we kind of save our leftovers for our spouse, right? Like, so husband's really busy at work all day and he's going to be late and he doesn't have a lot left to give at the end of the day. Same for the mom or the wife who's been spending the day with the kids, or even with your clients who have these special needs kiddos who take up all the time. And so we feel so disrespected when our time doesn't feel as valuable. That's a big issue that I work with a lot of clients. I would say that arguments around intimacy, sex, like I've asked for sex, I'm not getting sex, and that's because you're saying you're too tired or whatever. And then we have this give and take and this withholding that happens as a form of punishment sometimes too. Like, if you're not going to be home on time and you don't respect my time, I'm not going to respect your need. Just these kinds of patterns going back and forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, like, in the example that I brought up, like, so my husband comes through the door and he's late and he's missed dinner and he didn't communicate with me. I'm totally making this stuff off the top. I might make a snide comment like, glad you were, I don't know. So, some sort of snide comment. And then what? Like, it's typical for the man to just like then give us the cold shoulder or to be
right. Or they get upset or they're fine. We can say the snarky comment, but then we are angry. Like, they all come home, say sorry, but sometimes sorry is not enough, right? Sorry you didn't really mean it, right? But we've already decided that we're going to be angry. And so, the pattern, it can be either way. And it just depends on every single individual, how we react and what that looks like.
Yeah. So, but for me, if I'm trying to examine my pattern, I might be yelling. I might be giving my spouse the cold shoulder. I might be making snarky comments. I might be, being sort of mean to him or making mean comments. So those are the types of things that you would look for, the actions that you're taking that is make up your pattern.
Yeah, that's the piece that I want to identify for me. What is my part in it? Am I reacting that way? Is there something I can do to change that? What am I making it mean that he's late? That's really a good question that I think we should all ask all the time. What am I making it mean? Most of the time, I'm making it mean he doesn't respect me. He doesn't love me. I'm not important. But what if we could actually make it mean, wow, he's really doing a great job and feels very responsible to help provide for the family. Like, we get to assign meaning all the time. And so that's the easiest way to shift our piece of it once we identify what that is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then C is to change our response, right? C is where we come in and change our response and we try it. We say, okay, this is what I'm deciding to make this mean. I'm going to shift the pattern today by not reacting this way. And I'm going to stop expecting him to be on time. Like that expectation, when I know he's consistently late, is going to rob me of my happiness every time. Whereas if I go, okay, he's going to be late. That's how his job is. That's how we roll here. Then I don't have to be upset every time he walks in the door late.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so E then is evaluate. I shift the pattern. I see what happens. Did that work? Was it effective? What happened when I reacted this way? And I have to be just really mindful of it. Most of the time when we're caught in these patterns, we are not really cognizant of what's happening for us. We're not really even paying attention. We don't notice what our piece is of it. So really evaluating, how did that response change our evening together? Was that effective?
Yeah. So, like in the example that I gave where husband comes home late and didn't call, and, my normal pattern would be like he comes through the door and I'm making a really snarky comment.
Mm-hmm.
What would be something that I could do? I mean, obviously I need to change my thought and say I'm willing to react a different way, but what's a way that's more productive that I could consciously try to do that would kind
Yeah.
of cause that scenario to end up in a better spot?
Right. And I think that's the key. Like everybody wants to know the action. What can I do?
Yeah.
Right. But the truth is we have to find the thought that gives us the emotion that creates a better action. So as long as I'm thinking he's disrespecting me and he's not making me a priority, no matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to hide my annoyance.
Yeah.
It's going to show up in my actions in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
We might put a smile on, but it's going to show up in some way. And so it's getting to the root of it, which is the thought. What is the thought that I want to think about my husband when he comes home late?
Yeah.
That shifts the way that I feel about it.
Right. Like I'm going to choose to think about how hard he's working rather than how late he was.
And how much his hard work is a reflection of how much he loves us.
Yeah.
Right. Or just, whatever feels true to you, whatever
Mm-hmm.
you can find truth for.
Yeah.
There's this. And also, what else, brain? We have to ask our brains, what else is there? What else
Mm-hmm.
could this mean? And then put your brain to work finding the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can find that thought, find that reason, oh, this is just an outward expression of how much he loves us. It's not that fun for him to work extra hours, right?
Yeah.
He's had a long day too. How can we have some compassion for each other? And that doesn't mean we have to negate all the things that we're feeling, like all the tiredness and the needing of extra help, but sharing that when you're both able to talk to each other without the snarkiness is much more effective, because we're coming together as a partner. We're saying, we have this problem. How do we work together to solve it as partners?
Yeah. Can we do a quick detour? Can you give just a couple minute overview of the concept of the manual? Because I think the manual really comes into play with some of the patterns.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. So when we talk about a manual in coaching, it's typically we're talking about all the list of shoulds that we have for our partner, all the things that they should do in order to make us feel loved and cherished and
Mm-hmm.
appreciated. And we all have it. We all go into marriage with an idea, maybe of the way that your parents interacted. This was the right way, or you'd seen other people model this, like in rom-coms. This is how he should treat me.
Right. Or even this is
You
how
know?
I behave, so other people should behave exactly the same way as I behave.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And gosh, that's just such an assumption, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much to relationships and the fact that we're both raised in completely different familial circumstances. We have completely different communities, different socioeconomic backgrounds. Like there's so much that we assume that just because I believe this is the right way, my partner should know what that is. And it's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
We assume we know so much. And so having a manual for our partner is where we say, this is your list. This is your list of things that you need to do in order to make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
That's the manual.
Yeah. Yeah. And so a manual would come up, like in my example, a good husband should call if they're going to be late for dinner. A good
Right.
husband shouldn't even be late for dinner. A good husband should honor their commitment to like be home for dinner. It's
Right.
all of those thoughts. And sometimes we're not even aware that we're even consciously having those thoughts because they feel so true that
Totally.
that you kind of get dug in on those ideas, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And when we believe it, that's the thing. You made the point. Like it's not just a thought. It feels like a belief because we've practiced that thought so many times. It just feels true. So until we can actually take that thought and look at it and deconstruct it and really question it, is this true? Why is this true? Why should a husband be home on time? Why do I think that? Is there another way that I can see this?
Yeah.
And 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 really, when we have these expectations that someone else needs to perform in some way or bring something to the relationship in some way in order for me to feel loved, that's really operating in emotional immaturity. We have to like learn how to be emotionally mature in that we feel our emotional needs ourselves. We fill that bucket for ourselves and allow our partner to do that too. It's not our job to fill their bucket either.
Right.
When we can fire each other from that job and learn to be emotional adults in our relationship, that's when it just gets really, really fun. And we can just
Yeah.
enjoy each other for the heck of it.
I feel like that is part of the manual that, a good husband will make me happy.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
That's
yeah.
that's a bit of a mantra that I feel like most
Yeah.
of us are indoctrinated to believe. And
Yeah.
it's not true because when you put all your happiness into the hands of somebody else, you give up all your power and control over your life, really.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
It's a very un, disempowering place to be. Like
yes.
we are the victim then because our happiness, our satisfaction is completely dependent on the actions of someone else.
Yeah.
And that's just no way to live for anyone. Yet we do it all the time. There's so many people that live in that codependent state and it's
Yeah.
it's very damaging. Yeah.
And then one other thing about the manual that I just want to bring up because I think it's so common is the thought that like he should know or she should know, what makes me happy or what makes me sad or that this would make me upset. And it's a lot of that kind of like expecting the other person to read your mind. And it feels like such a belief that they should know these things. And then
Right.
you really set your partner up to
Yeah.
disappoint you.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, they have no chance of success in that situation. It's great. I teach a communication course for couples that addresses this very thing. And it is just so important that we stop assuming that they know and that we find our voice as a partner, as an equal partner, right? So we're not talking down to them. We're not saying you should know. We're not taking on that teacher role saying, you should know by now. We're saying, hey, as a partner, this is what I need you to know about me and what I thought about this situation that made me feel this way. Like explaining all of it and learning to say all of it and speak together as a partnership rather than assuming is just one of the most toxic things that we do because we're just dead wrong most of the time.
Yeah. Well, I think those couple of things really play into the patterns that we engage in with people because there are these expectations created by manuals. There's a lot of mind reading, all of that
Yeah.
stuff. And then that sort of sets you up to be, upset about things, angry about things, and then kind of get into this kind of communication pattern with your spouse that's very destructive and unhelpful.
Yeah.
Unhelpful at
Yeah.
best.
I
So,
mean, this happened just this past couple of days, this over the weekend for me. My husband and I were talking about something and he said something like, "Oh, don't be mad about that." And I was surprised me because I wasn't mad at all, but it was so great in the moment to be able to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't mad about that at all. That's not what's happening for me." But years ago, I would not have been able to do that. That would have
mhm.
been like, he doesn't even know me. And now I'm mad because he thinks I'm mad, right? I mean, you want mad? I'll show you mad.
Okay.
And but
So
it was just over quickly, like just done,
yeah.
because we've learned to communicate so quickly that
And
way.
how wonderful to get to
Yeah.
that place where
Oh
you can
yeah.
do that. Okay. So you talked
Yeah.
about patterns, noticing. The first step is always noticing. You might not be able to do anything about it right off the bat, but at least noticing what the patterns are and then figuring out a way to change the pattern so that you
Right.
change the dynamic.
Yes.
Um, then I think the next thing that we were going to talk about was being an emotional leader.
Yeah, this is a really important step. If you decide that you want a better relationship, so many of us want to just wait. Well, maybe we'll go to counseling. Maybe this will happen. Maybe there will be a change. Maybe the kids will grow up and leave the house and then we can be friends. Or maybe the kids will grow up and leave the house and we'll have nothing in common and we can't be together. I mean, like, it seems like there's just this constant waiting for things to get better. And what I would like to suggest is that we just decide that I'm going to be the emotional leader in my marriage. I'm going to take on that responsibility. I most of the people that I work with are pretty driven. They're very high achievers. They're very successful in a lot of areas of their lives. They are very good and very talented at what they do in their profession. But this one place, they still rely on their partner to be the emotional temperature gauge, right? And so deciding right up front, like, I'm going to be the emotional leader in my marriage. Look, what we've been doing up to this point hasn't worked, right? It's like someone has to make a change. So I'm going to be the one to do it. And setting a different tone. And you had talked a little bit about, share for a second the example that you shared with me about being an emotional leader in the workplace.
Yeah, so I was taking a kind of business sort of professional development course, and they talked about the concept of being the emotional leader and equating that. The analogy was you're sort of the weather system of the company, and so when you come in and you're sunny and you're shining and that's your disposition, everyone around you kind of picks up that disposition by osmosis because it's sort of contagious and infectious. But when you come in and you're really stormy, the opposite happens. If you're angry, if you're upset, if you're resentful, that kind of also infects the people around you. And I think that's a little bit similar to this concept that you're bringing up.
Yeah, yeah. There's one distinction I'd like to make, and that is that we don't cause other people's emotions. So, so the idea that I could be really happy and my happiness makes you happy is a little bit of a fallacy in that I'm happy. And then that makes it easier for you to think thoughts that make you happy.
Yes.
Right. So like my emotions don't spread around the room, but when I show up with that sunny disposition and I'm friendly and I'm warm, I make it much easier for other people to have those positive thoughts that create positive emotion for them. And
Yes,
that's
that's the
really,
breakdown.
yes,
Yes.
yes. Yeah. And so that is really kind of what I'm suggesting here in the marriage relationship. If we've got this pattern of being unhappy, could I just decide I'm going to be grateful. I'm going to notice the things that I appreciate. I'm going to focus on things that make me happy and thoughts that I enjoy. And I'm going to set that tone. And no matter what happens, whether husband comes home as a storm cloud or not, I'm going to stay in that state. I'm going
Yeah.
to maintain that for myself. And I'm going to set the tone and lead the way by that example.
Yeah. And if you're having a hard time maintaining it for a whole day to start, maybe sort of figure out, like for me, for example, the end of the day, I tend to have less patience. I tend to be a little more afraid. I tend to be, a little bit more apt to, maybe get frustrated a little easier.
Yeah.
So, if that tends to be the time when you tend to have a little more conflict in your day, maybe it's, can I have a different outlook? Can I be an emotional leader from, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. tonight? Like if that's when, everybody's getting home from work and that's kind of when conflicts happens, maybe even just trying to do it in that window.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that could
Baby
make a
steps.
huge
If that's
difference.
absolutely, again, we're just shifting the pattern.
Yeah.
We're just shifting the pattern. And that's kind of where the second tip comes in here, and that is to change the way that we interact with our spouse. And we talked about that with the patterns, but also when you think about your interaction, what does that look like in a day? Like take the time to journal. Like where do we interact? What does that look like? When we say goodbye in the morning, what is our process? Do we text each other? Do we talk on the phone during the day? When he comes home or when I come home, what's the greeting like? How are we interacting? And one of the ways that we can shift that pattern is to change it up. Like if I'm normally in this area and I'm doing this, can I switch it up? Or can I start sending a text during the day? Or in the morning when he leaves, instead of just saying goodbye and waving of the hand, can I take that extra 30 or 60 seconds and give him a hug and a kiss, like a real kiss, like kiss him like a lover, not just like a school mom pecking her kid out the door, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What can I do to change our interaction? That's the next step. Like
I love
just
that. So you kind of
figuring
have to
out.
be a detective and really do an
Yes.
inventory of kind of a couple days and figure out
Yeah.
what you're actually doing.
Yeah.
I think
And
that
you
might
will.
surprise some people. I'm just thinking about, I don't know. I'd really have to do an inventory of how my husband and I interact. It's not really ever something I've thought about.
Right. And because our brains love that repetition. And that's why
Hmm.
we get in a rut, because
Yeah.
the brain loves that repetition. And the more that we do it, the stronger those neural pathways get and the harder that it is to mix it up.
Yeah.
And what's funny too is that your partner will be like, well, wait, we don't normally do this. And it will be uncomfortable for them a little bit because they're like, the pattern is that this is how it happens when I come home from work. Right. Even if it's a destructive pattern, even if we're used to like the, the drama and we change it up and we are more pleasant, right? There's still that uncomfortableness of like, and I call it the wobble. Like there's this wobble, like what's happening? Why are things different? And so we really have to just look at our lives, review them and see where can I change it and start experimenting.
Yeah. Because oddly, the brain craves familiarity more than happiness.
Oh yeah.
And so that's where the wobble comes in because your brain's like, no, this is our time to fight. And that feels much more natural.
Right. Come back.
Yeah.
Wait. This is the time when we're arguing, right? This is when we're like, no, you put the kids to bed.
Exactly. Oh, that's so
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, I'm actually going to try that. I'm going to do an inventory for a few days and just kind of see because
Yeah.
that's
See how
that's
you
really
can mix it
fascinating.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. And then shift.
Yeah. The third tip is to shift your focus to the future. So, one of the things that we have to do when we're trying to mend our relationship is to learn to let that past go. So many of us want to hold on to it. We want to think about what happened yesterday or be mad about what happened last week. And there's zero possibility of us changing it. And so I would just like to offer that we can let it go and understand that the only way that it has power to hurt us anymore is if we keep thinking about it.
Hmm.
And so when we shift our focus, even in a day, right? Like, okay, what's tonight? I'm going to focus ahead. I'm going to focus to tomorrow, to next week, to next month. But when my brain wants to shift and look back to the past, I've got to gently pull it back and say, oh, remember. Oh, remember, sweet brain. Let's just give it a
Yeah.
little love. It's okay, brain. Remember, sweet brain, we're not going to be there anymore. We're going to
Yeah.
let that go. I can't change it. What can I do now? Let's shift the focus to the future.
Yeah, your brain's trying to protect you by like cataloging all of these events and creating meaning around all of them. And it really is just kind of junk that happened in the past. You know,
Right.
there really is no, I mean, everyone who's listening has permission to get rid of all those thoughts about all the things in the past that happened. You don't have to collect all of those things to protect yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like that heavy luggage that we carry around.
Hmm.
And the angrier we get, the more infractions, the larger our file of offenses. It gets
Yes.
heavier and heavier and heavier. And so I love this analogy. Jody Moore gave this analogy once and I loved it. It was so good. She talked about, have you ever been at the airport and you see someone walking with like this big trunk? let's just imagine like we're at the airport, there's someone hauling this big trunk and they get to the escalator and they try to go up the escalator and it doesn't fit in the little
Mm-hmm.
track system,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you hop on the step and then you're like bending over backwards trying to hang on to this trunk. And then, but what you want to do is you want to get up here. You want to go to your destination. And that's kind of like hanging on the past. If we just let it go, just drop the trunk
Mm-hmm.
and let it go and move on, you're free. You're free
Mm-hmm.
and easy. And then we can build on what we have today. We can let the past go.
Do you have any tips for people who have a hard time with that?
Um, it takes a lot of work, honestly. Like this is work we do in coaching to help you identify those painful thoughts. Sometimes we believe them so strongly, like it's impossible to let it go because it's just such a firm belief.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I'm a Christian and I believe that we can pray for that help to let those things go, like ask to be able to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
But really the work in coaching that we do is helping you find out why we're having those thoughts and learn how to process the emotion that comes with them. It's
Mm-hmm.
a big deal, especially if we have something that's trauma related, where the circumstance and the feeling are so tied together, we can't even access the thought. We have to be able to process that emotion,
Mm-hmm.
work through that emotion before we can change the T line, the thought line.
Yeah, because some people are dealing with past events that are, you know, he keeps leaving the dishes in the sink. But then some people are dealing with bigger issues like infidelity or,
Yeah.
some of those types of things that are a little bit harder just to let go and leave in the past.
Right, right. Yeah, it's not as simple as it sounds. And I know I make it sound very easy, and it is, but you have to get to that point. We have to move you step by step to that point in order to let it go.
Yeah.
Now, if it is dishes in the sink, I'm saying I give you permission to let it go.
Yeah.
Just drop it. Totally fine. If there's trauma or something else, yes, let's work on that.
Yeah.
Let's figure it out.
Yeah. And at the end, we'll talk about, how to access all of Jane's work and how to access more of Jane if you're interested in digging in, if you maybe have had, some things that have happened to you in the past that are a little bit harder to let go and are really impacting your relationship now. Jane's got a lot of resources for helping you. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So the next step I would say is to find your common goals. So many times we forget that the things that we're fighting about, we have a common goal. So let's take the instance where, in fact, this just happened with a client last week. They had a situation where there was an event and dad wanted things to happen this way and mom wanted things to happen this way. And so they had very strong opinions and the kids were kind of in the middle. They had different ideas of how. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to, like, it's a private matter. Right.
Yeah.
But so mom felt like she was stuck in the middle between dad and the kids as to how they were going to attend this event. And so, it was really great for them because we asked the question, what is the common goal? And they really had the common goal. They both wanted to support the kids and they both wanted to support the people at the event. They were united in that. And I think so many times we assume that the problem is our partner, where let's keep the problems in the problem zone and let's attack the problem together. How as partners can we address this? We don't have to take sides.
Yeah. I mean, it seems pretty uncommon that people take the time to even figure out what their shared goals are.
Yeah. Yeah, we forget. We forget. And that's part of the problem because then we just assume that they don't care about something that's really important to us. But if we take the time to really ask, is he committed to this family? What is his goal? Of course, if I think about it, his goal is, yes, he's trying to support here and he's trying to support here. Once we can see that we're on the same page that way, then the problem's easily handled.
Mm-hmm.
But we often identify our partner as part of the problem when they just don't need to be.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great tip though, to figure out what the common goal is and try to work toward that instead of attacking the other person. Figure out how you can reach that common goal together.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Exactly. And it helps us to start giving to our partner what we'd also like to receive. Like when we see that, yeah, this is a common goal for them and this is a common goal for me. This is what I would like in this situation. So why don't I try that? Let's see if that's effective. Because we are on the same page more than we think we are.
Hmm. Yeah. So like, how do you, so one of the common situations that I hear with parents of children with special needs is that one of the parents, typically the mom, but not always, feels like she's doing more of the care. And the dad might be doing something, like working outside the home or doing other things. But the mom typically feels like she's kind of relegated without discussion, almost in a default way, to the care of the child. And
Yeah.
so, how do you find a common goal in that situation?
Yeah. Well, the common goal in that situation to me, as I hear it, is we've got two parents who are absolutely invested in the best possible success for this child. So mom is staying home, dad is providing the money in this case that you're presenting, right? Like could be
Hmm.
opposite. Maybe dad's home and maybe mom's working.
Yeah.
But that's the common goal. We both want what's best for this kiddo.
Hmm.
So if we have that and we know that that's true, then we have to have a conversation about how we best accomplish that.
Hmm.
Right? It's about having the conversation. What happens is people just get angry and silent and
Hmm.
resentful.
Hmm.
And they start assuming that partner doesn't care about their plight, doesn't care about the stress that they go through.
Yeah.
And then we're resentful, right? But the door is opening up the communication and learning how to talk together as partners.
Yeah.
That's really the key.
And I feel like having a common goal of discretionary time, might be appropriate there because, like I feel like people who work outside the home are exhausted when they come home and they need downtime. But then also that parent who's been with the child or children all day also needs that downtime. So it's figuring out, the
Yes.
common goal. We both need to have a life. We both need to feel fulfilled and satisfied and have time away from our respective jobs. And so, how can we accomplish that so that both people get what they need?
Yeah. Yeah. But when we don't ask that question and we just blame,
Yes.
that's when we have trouble, right? Like if we ask the question and we can talk about it and we say, here's the problem. It's just like math, right? We have this problem. What are the solutions? And then we
Yeah.
brainstorm together. What are those solutions? Can we have some outside help? Can we get are there times when I can kick in more or you can kick in more? What can we
Right.
do? How can we compromise? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that way of just redirecting the problem toward the goal as opposed to the other person. That's
Yes.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And then you
Good.
had
Yeah.
one last
Just
suggestion.
yes. And yeah, the final suggestion is just to create some fun. Have some fun. So often we get stuck in those ruts and we have a lot of responsibility and we honestly forget to plan for fun
Hmm.
in our relationships. We forget to get the calendar out and not just calendar, doctor's appointments and all of the house needs and schedules and the car needs and all of
And the
those things. But
school
like,
and the,
when
yeah.
are we going to have some fun? What are we going to do? It's
Hmm.
so easy to sink into our misery when we don't feel like we're getting along and everything feels really heavy and hard. And so one of the questions that we ask in coaching often is, how can we make this more fun? Even the hard stuff, how can we make it more fun? Such a good question.
I love that question. I need to ask that all the time about everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
That
mean, life is supposed to be joyful. I really believe that. And no matter what the sea is, no matter what the circumstance is, we're meant to have joy. And I believe that that means taking a break, having some fun, and finding ways to celebrate little things during our day. I mean, for me, it can be as simple as, oh, I get to have a Diet Coke. I'm just going to go have a little celebration and have a Diet Coke and take a break. Like it doesn't have to be a major thing, but it's the way we think about it.
yeah.
It's the thing that we think about, the time that we're taking that makes it fun.
Yeah,
What
I
thoughts
I
are they
love that. we don't sit down and put fun into the calendar. That's just not really a concept that I've been thinking about too much. So it sounds like that might be a really worthwhile exercise.
Yes, I had a client recently up in Washington who was very busy entrepreneur mother, and they had this awesome son, but he did have some special needs too, had some autism and things happening, and I just asked her the question. So, how are you celebrating each day? What are you celebrating each day? And she looked at me like I'd grown a horn on my head. Like, why would I celebrate today? It's not nobody's birthday or anything like that. But really, I think that's the question to ask ourselves. If today's our last day, and it could be, if that's true for all of us, like how do we want to spend it? How do we
Yeah.
want to celebrate the little things? What can
Yeah.
we celebrate in each other? For my husband and I, it was really awesome the other night as we were just laying in bed and we were talking a little bit, and I was telling him a little bit about my week. And I just said to him, I am just so overjoyed when I think about you and me and our relationship. And I think about us and I think we're just the most remarkable people because we've done hard things and we're still here. And I just celebrate that with him. Like the fact that we're committed and that we're together and that we've been through hard things. I think we're champions. So
That's amazing.
all of your people can
Yeah.
relate to this, right?
It's so inspiring that you can get to that place with someone you've been married to or been in a relationship with for so long and been through really hard things. It's just such an
Yeah.
inspiration that you can get to that point.
Yeah. It's honestly the best. It's
Yeah.
such a joyful place.
Yeah.
Totally possible for anyone
I
that wants to
love that.
stay. Yeah.
Well, Jane, if people want to learn more about you, more about your work, I know that you have, a mailing list of wonderful, inspirational emails and things that you send out.
Right.
So where can people go to find out more
Yeah.
about you and more about your offerings?
So you're welcome to come to my website. It's janecopier.com. It's my last name is just a funky Dutch name. It's spelled COPIER JANE COPIER.com.
I'll
And
link to it below.
yeah, there's a link there. You can join me. I have a great free Facebook group. It's a private Facebook group called Make Your Marriage Amazing. I'm on Instagram at Jane Copier Coaching and TikTok, The Marriage Coach. So
Mhm.
come join me, join my list. I always have offerings. I have a communication course that I offer, a program that's a group program also that involves some coaching and teaching as well. So just lots of resources for anyone who wants to make their marriage incredible.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you for coming on here and thank you for all the incredible work that you do. And I hope some people in the audience will check out your stuff, and I hope people have
Laura.
benefited. I certainly have benefited from our talk today.
Awesome. Thanks again for having me. It's been a
Of
treat.
course. Of
Hey.
course.